We've got to move this industry forward. We have to break down the silos between developers and designers and contractors. Like, we're literally designing and building and shaping communities and the planet.
All right. Apparently I'm the fireside chat guy. I'm up here again.
Where's the fire?
Just an interviewer. Rowland, how's it going?
Good. Great to see everybody.
Do you mind just sharing a little bit about yourself and Stake to educate everyone on what you do?
Yeah, so Stake is cashback for renters. So we've done the really crazy thing of going to landlords and saying, why don't you give some of your money back to your renters. So you can imagine going and starting to be able to do that. But it's actually not as crazy when you think about credit cards do this, right? Retail does it where they give something back and you're doing it because you get an action in return. Right? What's marketing? Marketing is being able to get an action. I persuade you, I get you to be able to take an action. So Stake uses cashback rewards to get renters to take an action, and it has the incredible benefit of helping renters build savings. We help them with a full banking platform with that cash back, so they not only get the cash from the owner, they unlock banking services. 65% of our renters have more money saved in our bank accounts than they have in any other bank account. So we get this really great win-win, but we begin with kind of this unusual idea of going to landlords and saying, hey, why don't you give some cash back to your renters, which is so needed right now given where the economy is.
So the title, if you look at the title slide on our TVs here, the growth of Stake was the original concept for this conversation. We actually changed the topic. So the topic is building a mission-oriented startup in an uncertain economy, which I think is, well, we'll get Rowland's take, but in my opinion, that might even be a harder concept to do, to build in a downturn. Like you just mentioned, when businesses are pressed, have thinner margins, greater uncertainty in their own lives and in their own operations, it's much harder to ask them for money.
Yeah, I mean, mortgage rates, I have to tell everybody here what's going on, right? Rates are going up a lot at the moment, which means that multifamily, et cetera, is more nervous, right? Cap rates are gonna be a lot harder than they were in the last 10 years. In many ways, I don't know if we have owners and operators here, I don't want to say it was easy in the last 10 years, but it was easier. In the last 2 years, rents have gone up 25, 35%. We have some markets where it's gone up even more. So as they're feeling that pinch, going in and asking them for, hey, why don't you give cash back? They're like, well, this is money I'm going to be putting out. Isn't even more tricky to do. So we have to be able to really defend the return on investment, improve it, and show them that it's there. Now for renters at the moment, and there's going to be a lot more renters given where mortgage rates are, right? It's a lot harder, like what you used to be able to get with a 3-4% to buy a home. 3-4% meant you could buy 600,000, 700,000 home. Now that's going to get you about 400,000. There's going to be a lot more renters. So for renters, they're also really struggling to be able to save. There's not a lot of government stimulus coming at the moment to be able to help renters out. I don't think that's going to happen. So on that side, there's a real need. But it means that every dollar matters. I mean, real estate is a game of inches. And so when we're going and asking them like, hey, why don't you give some cash back to your renters, we have to really prove that $1 can turn into $2. And I think kind of in the economy right now, that's what they're asking us for.
Yeah. So just to give everyone a little context, I'm sure anyone who's familiar with the Shadow portfolio has heard us talk about Stake. They're one of the more successful companies in terms of growth that we have in the current fund. So we've been very excited to work with Rowland. But I wanted to take a step back to talk about like why we decided to invest. I met Rowland. I think it's actually pretty funny. It was like a LinkedIn reach out from a random guy in Italy. I think he reached out to KP. KP forwarded to me. I was like, okay, I'll take the call, not thinking very much of it. And in fact, the original reason that we decided to take the call, we thought it would be a bolt-on for an existing portfolio company in multifamily tech. We thought, rewards could be, it's probably a feature, it's probably not its own business, but could be interesting to add on to a platform. Well, after about 10 minutes with Rowland, I figured out that our thesis was entirely wrong. there is a real business here, and they have tapped into something even more primary and direct than that platform business that we were potentially wanting to add them onto was. And to me, it was very obvious when we had the conversation. And a lot of the reason I think I felt that way was because of the stat that you mentioned with early stake users. So you might not have caught this, 60% of the thousands of users on stake have more money in their stake app than they do their actual savings account. Like that is just, I mean, it's a staggering data point. And even earlier on, it was higher. I think it was like 85%, like a couple years ago. And so when we think about mission, like part of the thing that's always struck me about Stake's mission is it's empowering savings in a moment in time where savings has never been valued. Right. And there's this lack of education around personal finance, especially in a renter community that has aspirations of owning a home. They have aspirations of building wealth, yet something's not clicking and they can't save any money. Can you just expand on, one, that data point, how you're tracking it, what it means to the team, and how that kind of informs the broader culture?
So we began with a lot of ideas around renter savings. So one of the first things that I did in New York when I wanted to start Stake was go and talk to renters. So the way I did that is I became a broker. Actually, to be honest, I didn't officially get licensed as a broker. I just started showing apartments. Do not tell people in New York. So I started showing apartments because I wanted to talk to renters, like what matters to them. So I come from a background in loyalty. I've worked with pretty much every brand you can think of, from American Airlines, United, Starwood, Preferred Guest before it was bought by Marriott. And so I'd always been fascinated with these win-win loyalty programs, right? Like how do you get somebody to take that action and how does it become a win-win? But you have to find what actually matters to renters, right? Or to your user. You have to go and talk to them. You can't, if I give you the 10th burrito free and you don't like burritos, like not gonna work. So, and that's where people begin. They usually begin with like loyalty programs. They're gonna give you the 10th one free. Nobody cares about that, so nobody takes the action, and you give a lot of things away for free. Not good. So in talking to renters, and I was going up and down these staircases and 6th floor walk-ups. I was a terrible broker, by the way. And asking these questions to people like, what matters to you? And one dude just completely snapped at me and just goes, it's just the money, stupid. Like, and it's the money. Like, rent's really high. They care about the money. They don't care about points. They don't care about the 10th thing free. They don't really care about the amenities that much. I think it's a well-known secret that amenities get people on leasing and then they don't use them. So that's where we were like, okay, cashback is a solution that's worked elsewhere, and it's gonna be really hard to go and help with that. And so from the mission level, we sort of be like, well, it doesn't matter if I just give you $20 if you go and spend the $20, you're gonna forget about it, right? The points need to accumulate over time. So we created another nudge, another behavioral change where we give a bonus if people save. It's kind of like getting interest, but we give bonuses to people for saving. We tried it. So we said, hey, if you keep a little money in the stake account, we'll give you more. And if you keep more, we'll give you more, and kind of this basic idea, because actually people don't understand interest. People in this room probably understand interest. People don't generally understand interest. So turning into a savings bonus worked. So people kept it in the account. And at that point, it was just an escrow account. It's kind of like Venmo, or like the money you put on your Starbucks card, where the money's being held there, but it's not in like an interest-bearing account or a checking account. And people left it in because we kept on giving them more. And when you look at the numbers, the average American renter has less than $400 in savings. And most American renters, like 70%, spend down to zero every month. Like no money saved. So we're not talking about having to be able to achieve like money saved in the way that people in this room may think about it, which is like buying a home. It may be enough to be able to change the tires on the car, or it may be I can go out this weekend for dinner with my family. Like really simple, basic things of like what savings might mean, you may have to rethink. And as we rethought that and thought about with the bonus, we started to see the rates go up. What are you saving for? So one of my favorite stakers, as we call them, in Houston, he's been delivering for the post office for 20 years. And it's coming up to a big wedding anniversary, and he's just saving to go out to dinner for the wedding anniversary. That's what he's saving for. So the combination of this very transactional behavioral science change, like we're gonna give you cash back to change this action, then putting into a bigger picture mission, what are you saving for, what matters to you, becomes the story, right? That's the thing that matters. And suddenly something like rentals, which unfortunately could be a little transactional, a little bit they don't care about the individuals, and they become really meaningful, and people will take that action you need them to take. They'll renew more, they'll pay their rent on time, they'll sign the lease, they'll take advantage of the amenities, whatever it is. So that's kind of how we think about savings.
Yeah, so you mentioned the difference in what savings actually means to different types of renter demographics. Class A renter with large disposable income, maybe they've made the personal choice just to rent, even though they could actually afford to buy a home, versus a workforce renter or an affordable housing renter.
Yeah.
The ability to save enough money to go out to dinner or to pay down a car payment, pay down a credit card bill, whatever it might be. Can you talk about how you've thought about those different types of renters? Because you are serving all of them.
Yeah, we have everything. We just started working with Avalon Bay, which we're really excited about. I was really actually tuning into that conversation before about pilots. There's a lot I can say about that as well. Yeah, and that's a rent of average $3,500 to like up to $6,000 a month in rent. Is a very different thing than somebody who's paying, which is our bread and butter today, $1,000 in rent, $1,100 actually now. Everybody can use more money. Like I could use some as a startup founder for sure. Like I could save for something. I should be saving more. So everybody has their dreams of what they're saving for. If you're somebody in a luxury apartment, let's say late 20s, early 30s, you're a high earning, not rich yet, the Henry, as they like to call it, you're probably paying down student loans, right? Like that's a lot of the dream is like, I need to pay down my student loans, or I'm saving for a home. So everybody has something they're saving for, it's just different of where it is. Our affordable category, and we know because we get the aggregated anonymized data, so we can see what people are not only saving for, but what they spend their cash back on. And affordable, number one expense that they're spending their cash back on is medical expenses. So just think about that in the US, right? Like that's the thing that folks are, get the money, they're saving. So like that is something that's, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, like super important, they're gonna need that. Obviously at luxury, you're getting less of that, a little further up on the hierarchy of needs. But at the same time, student loans, saving for a home feels very urgent to that person. As long as you've tapped into what's important to somebody, there's always savings that can be done. And sometimes it's a little bit more frivolous. We have people who are saving for like that vacation or whatnot, but it's still important to them. So I think that's the key thing. What are you saving for, and what matters to you? It's not, while it is the money, it's what the money does for you. It's going to help you save for something important.
Yeah. So obviously, hearing you talk about Stake's mission and being primarily focused on solving a renter problem, which is helping them save and building wealth, powering them, it's clear that's become the company ethos, and it's more or less contagious within the culture of Stake. And I know that being on the board and seeing this firsthand, I know that is a big part of how you recruit, and that's a big part of how you interact with team members. They have to be bought into the mission. There's dozens of self-help books in the business world for leaders who are trying to build mission at their company, and it's really hard. Oftentimes, these are like very marginal differences in how you talk about and frame what the company is doing and the greater purpose it's serving in society. But you've tapped into it, and I know that I was in New York a couple weeks ago at their customer event, and the way that your employees talk about working for Stake and what they're a part of, it's clear you've been successful at getting that buy-in and adoption from the team. Can you just like walk us through like how you've architected that, how you talk about it? It seems to be rather natural, and it's not like some greater calculated thing that you're waking up every morning and writing down how to build culture. It comes through, but there were clearly some strategic moves you made to be able to achieve that.
So I think in the last 10 years, a lot of people have kind of unfortunately abused mission or purpose. Like if you think about, I'm gonna pick on one, which is we're gonna make the world's consciousness or change the world's consciousness, right? Which is where we work at.
No one knows what company that is, right?
Yeah. So like there's some things where, and that's treating mission as input instead of output. What I mean by that is that it's you can tell the inauthenticity in that. Like, and that's the reason why it didn't ring true, and clearly, that caused an IPO to crash. Like there's just sort of like, that doesn't seem right. And I think that's what a lot of people have kind of a bullshit reaction when they hear things that don't ring true. So it has to be authentic at the beginning. It has to be the output that you want to get to. And I don't think it always has to be huge things. It has to be the things that you truly care about. It could be just efficiency, like I've been hearing a lot more today on construction side, and you can hear the passion about being able to make something more efficient, or being able to, actually really like the phrase earlier of using technology as the leverage rather than people or capital. I just thought rang true to me a lot. So this has to come across as authentic to you. So our first cultural principle is come with your authentic self. And we talk about return on rent, we talk about building wealth for renters, and everybody has their own kind of story behind that, right? Everybody comes from different backgrounds and whatnot. So that's one of the things that we ask of what it means to you in the interviews. But we've noticed when people come to us, and I'll actually give our head of customer success, Miranda, a shout out, because she wrote me what was maybe one of those craziest LinkedIn messages ever about how much she wanted the job. And it was either like, am I going to be okay? Like, is this person going to show up? And like, but she was like, she was like so intense about it.
Stalker vibes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We were like, but she was so passionate about why that she gave this whole story about her background and whatnot, which, and I think that's where you get to this thing beyond sort of like what you're paying in salary or equity to, this means something to me, and I'm willing to go that extra distance to be able to do it. And I don't think it always has to be something that is about, big social issues either. It just has to be what's true to you as a founder or true to the problem you're solving.
But specifically in the recruiting process, like you're asking questions that would give you some sort of intelligence on if they would be a culture fit or not.
So we go through a thing where the team interviews, and I do the last interview, which is a cultural interview where I don't talk about the job at all and just talk about what it means to them. And I just want to hear what's important to them in it. And it doesn't even mean that, like, say for our iPhone engineer, that I expect them to be like 100% into the mission.
Sure.
But if it's something where it doesn't resonate with them and they're way more transactional about it, it's probably not going to be a good fit for us, because it's hard to go and ask landlords for cash back, right? This is not an easy thing that we're going to do. We do the hard things first and try to go and really kind of break down those doors. So it is going to take extra effort. It's not going to be something that's just going to be a 9 to 5. So we're looking for that. And if we were going to ask people to do that extra effort, it better matter to them, not just because we're asking.
Yeah. So we were chatting a little bit before this, and you brought up Sean's talk, and specifically on being really early, being in that kind of trough of disillusionment. And by the way, like you more or less started Stake during the pandemic. Now there's a pretty massive inflation crisis going on with that affects renters. So you've seen a lot in the economy in a couple years, but you specifically mentioned doing the hard things first. And I think also too, like I attribute that I mean, that's a cultural mentality. Can you talk about during those periods of time when it was really difficult to be selling in real estate specifically, and asking them for essentially, I mean, you're asking them just to take cash out of their pocket and give it back to renters and invest in them.
So in March of 2020, COVID hit, had a founder change out, which is a whole other sort of stories that sort of felt that pain as well. And we were down to $20,000 in the bank, $30,000. And so it really came down to just myself. We had the idea, we knew what it was, the app was built, and then COVID hit. And so I'm in the New York apartment. It's about 900 square feet with my boyfriend, who's a psychologist, and I'm in the other room making 60 calls a day to landlords. He can give my pitch, by the way, like verbatim. So, poor guy. So I'm doing this and or calling and calling and calling. And, like one of the things we found during COVID was people would actually answer the phone more than before because they were just at home. So we called their mobile, and I kind of got this pitch down, and we managed to get our first two, the gamblers, who jumped in. And but it was hard at that point. One of the things that happened at that time was another LinkedIn message. So some graduate from my alma mater reached out on LinkedIn saying, I have this great job from Google, but I don't want to go and work remote for Google. So looking forward to going down to the campus and working with them. I love what you're doing from a mission level. Can I help in any way? So I was like, oh yeah, trying to pretend like we had money, I was like, but interns, we just pay a stipend to. So anyway, long story short, Jimmy became my co-founder. He's an incredibly brilliant engineer. He's 24. Again, in 6 weeks, he had refactored our entire back end, came up with an algorithm to be able to name the price of the cash back. So he's like, why are we just doing it statically? We should do it this way. So many great things happened in that time period. We landed our first 2 clients. I got my next co-founder, who's incredible. And then it just kind of went from there. I think it was probably about a month or 2 later that somebody in Italy contacted you.
Yeah.
That's a whole nother crazy story.
Sounds about right. So fun fact, Rowland and I, he mentions his boyfriend is a psychologist. So my wife is a therapist, and she also can recite my pitch. She's heard me making the 60 calls
we need to start a support group just for them.
So yeah, exactly. So we still haven't connected them. We need to make sure to do that. All right, so one of the things that you often, so broad thematic trend that's come up in investing is the idea of impact investing, mission-oriented investing. ESG is another word that's kind of thrown around in those circles these days. But there's the balance whenever you're building a mission-oriented company and whenever you're impact investing and actually making a return on your money while also trying to benefit society. That's like the overall concept of the idea of impact investing. With Stake, more or less what you're trying to do, we're invested in the company. We backed you early. There are expectations around returns. Any deal that we underwrite as a venture capital firm, we have to believe can basically 100x. We just can't. We can't fund the company if they can't. The failure rates are too high for it to be. Anything less than that would be an underwhelming, not a failure, but not the outcome we're searching for. So can you talk about how you balance working with investors who have those sorts of expectations, like me, and just your own personal goals? I know you have massive ambitions for potentially the size of the company. And how you balance both like striving for that mission and also the capitalistic side of returning a large dollar amount.
So early in my career, when I started, it was just a shift from TV into Google, not to date myself, but this is the time it happened. So I always loved that quote that was like, I know 50% of my marketing's working, I just don't know which 50%, which is kind of like the early TV, and then you move to Google and it's direct attribution and you can prove it. So we begin with, we can prove the action that you're taking. Like if you're gonna go and spend money on a 1 month free offer to get renters in, like why 1 month? Why not 2? Why not 6 weeks? Why not, the 10th burrito free? Like how do you know that this is the one that's gonna work? Where's the data, where's the attribution? So we begin with that. Like and similarly on the ESG side, on social impact, it's the same thing. Like we're kind of past the period of just being able to just say it's ESG and then you're good to go. Big pension funds are asking their sponsors, show me that you have made an impact in somebody's life. Like I need the exact data to be able to prove it. So the way we've built our platform is always to be on that kind of Google attribution model. Like somebody responds to the offer, they get the money in their account, they save more, I can prove all of those. And I can show you exactly what those numbers are. I'm not guessing, and we're not like throwing some crazy regression analysis where like we tweak the p-value enough, to be able to get the result that we wanted. Is direct attribution, which is where Google won early days, Facebook won early days. So I think there's so much money that's being spent in multifamily, single family, student housing, residential real estate that just isn't tracked in any way. So we're kind of really hard-nosed on that point. Like we just get really, really detailed, and kind of sometimes, and I think I forget, I'll get out of the mission and just get so focused on that. Because if you're gonna sit with somebody who's, we have our first fund that's gonna be branded all as Stake coming out soon. It's a $250 million fund, be levered up to $1 billion, to go and get that sort of money to say, all this is gonna go to buying properties, everybody in these properties is gonna get cash back with Stake. Like you're sitting across from asset managers who wanna see that return. Like this isn't just a haircut for the investors, is it? Like, we need to make some money back. So, but at the same time, you have to be able to pull out of those conversations and know when to be like, here's what the data is going to be able to say, but we'll follow the data. Like maybe we'll be wrong. Maybe it won't return as much as we think, but at least you're going to have more data than you have today. And I think sometimes that's an important side as well. Similar with Google, right? Like not all Google ads work great. Some work better than others, but at least you can track it. And so at least we're better than the status quo.
Yeah.
So.
You mentioned the deal with Enterprise, who's the $250 million fund that will be rolling it out across their full portfolio. Their story is interesting, right? How they actually landed on the deal with Stake.
Yeah.
They tried to do it on their own, but I'll let you tell the story. It's interesting.
Well, so the Enterprise Community Partners has built about 900,000 affordable homes in a 40-year history. They're part of the leader in affordable grant making. Big organization, not-for-profit-ish, and so they were convinced that they needed to do something to be able to create equity for renters. Like, hey, if we could get renters equity, they would do better. So we pitched them in about 2020. And it was the first pitch. And they all seemed happy. It was like 10 of them on the call. And then they promptly ghosted us. But apparently right afterwards, they went and hired a consulting firm. I used to be in consulting, so I know the consulting firm they hired. So they hired a consulting firm to do a year-long study, like what do renters want? So remember that story I was telling about, like walking up in Brooklyn and the renter says to me, they took a year and spent a lot of money with consultants to be able to figure out the same thing where they're like, renters don't care about equity, actually. Because one, they don't believe that building's as worthwhile as one that you own. And two, they don't believe that you're gonna give them the money. And three, they need money like right now. Like they don't need it later and they don't trust you to manage it anyway. So they came back to us a year later, they're like, well, we've been calling it like a rent rebate. And so we're like, well, here's the cashback offer and here's how to be able to do it. So they're like, well, this is what the consultant said after a year of study and lots of data in this as well. It was a 5,000 renter survey and blah, blah, blah. So that was kind of where it began. They ended up writing a check into us in the Series A round and now they're raising unique funds around this. And I won't name names, but there's other private equity groups who are now looking to do the same thing. Hey, if we can actually measure the result of what we can do with renters and we can get a better return, this is a perfect solution for private equity, right? Who's under a lot of pressure right now from an ESG level to show that they are doing something for renters, not just driving prices up. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So that, Enterprise has been an incredible partner.
Yeah, that's great. So number one thing most founders miss about mission and culture, in your opinion?
I think that, I go back to what I was saying before about input versus output. I think people see it as kind of PR or the sort of like, here's how we're gonna build our positioning. But if it's not authentic to truly what you're doing, not just the problem, like a lot of times people will build the mission out of the problem. The mission has to meet the solution as well. Right, so this is the part of where you can see, I'll even poke a little bit at this. There's some folks in the rental world who say they're building like renter wealth, but they're really focused on debt. Well, I'm not saying it's bad. Like, I mean, sometimes debt can be useful for folks, but I'm not sure if it necessarily you can say debt and wealth go together. So I think you have to compare it to the mission and solution. And I think it comes from the side of like, well, mission is just a PR exercise, or it's a positioning exercise, or it's a way that I can get more clicks. That's going to ring hollow, kind of giving the example from before. I think that you have to have something that just truly, that everybody on the team truly believes, and you almost don't need the like, hey, have you gone and read the mission statement? Like nobody, I don't think ours is even written down. Like it's just something that everybody says. We say it a little bit differently every time, but it's always around creating wealthier renters. And I don't think there's anybody on the team who doesn't know that, and our investors know it. And it also becomes a yardstick for us on making decisions as well. So we'll tell that to when people buy with us.
Yeah.
Like we won't make a decision that we think is not going to end in that. So if you're uncomfortable with that, then we're not the partner.
I think the other thing that is somewhat obvious is like the mission is very simple. You can't really miss it. And I don't think everyone has a business that has that sort of luxury.
Yeah.
Like the concept and what you're fulfilling on. I think the reason that the team maybe can grasp it so quickly and explain it and articulate it to anyone is because it's just like you have it distilled down in your shirt, 2 words: empower renters.
Yep.
Any advice on how to like bring that clarity out to people who are searching for it, but it might not be as obvious?
So I kind of beat up on the PR people because I started in PR. That's where I began in the world. I do think that you want to avoid you can type them into Google. There's certain like mission generator things you can find on Google. You kind of know what they sound like when it's like so many different words and doesn't make sense. Just the thing that, what is more efficient? What is going to be better when this, if this happened in all the available market, what is going to be better? And I think sometimes being able to make it boring is fine. You know, like I think that's I mean, Tesla's mission is to accelerate the future of electric adoption. I'm getting it slightly wrong, but it doesn't sound like as big as you think Tesla is. It's a really brilliantly written mission statement because it's just what they do, right? And the accelerating the future adoption of it is like brilliant. So I would say just keep it simple. It's okay to be boring because a lot of the big problems in the world are actually boring problems. I don't think everything has to have a social impact. I wouldn't try to be able to grasp that if that's not really what you're doing. But if you are doing something that truly has a social impact, make sure that the solution connects to it, like that it's authentic, is real.
That's great. I want to open it up to the audience for questions. What questions do you have? Yeah.
How do you make money?
Yeah, we got to get to that. We charge we make money in two ways. We charge a transaction fee on all the cash back that's given. So we're fundamentally a fintech platform, and we make money the more renters that we bank. So the more renter deposits that we get, and the more that they're using our banking services, the more we can make there. The more landlords give cash back to renters, the more money we can make. So we're truly incentivized all the way through to be able to help the renters earn more. And owners aren't going to spend the cash back to be able to give to renters unless it works. So we're asking for a lot of money, each time. But we're a fintech platform, not a SaaS platform. So.
Wait, so is it more inspired like a stake pool off crypto? Kind of like, you can stake and then they go to basically they earn based off of the fee. I mean, it's kind of like that.
So we began, the first iteration, which I didn't talk about at the beginning, was a crypto approach and wanted to be able to go down the blockchain approach. We ended up making it much simpler to just cash back and the cash back that's given. And the true challenge is naming the amount of cash back. So I'll give you a really interesting example in single family, because everybody probably knows this, like HVAC filters, owners change, renters don't, right? The owner's like, yeah, I'm gonna change this. I don't want this thing breaking, it's expensive. Renter's like, somebody's gonna come and change that. That's expensive to get somebody out there to be able to change that filter. We give a cashback reward for changing the filter. So how much to give, right? Like that's the question. I mean, everybody in this room would have a different idea of how much to give. Somebody would say $5, somebody else will say $150. It turns out it's about 18 bucks on average. So we've A/B tested, using a lot of behavioral kind of things to be able to figure out what's the amount that you get the most amount of people doing it without overspending. So that's where we put a lot of the energy into. I'd love longer term for this to become more of a blockchain approach, but right now we're really focused on how much cash to be able to give to get somebody to take the action that you want, kind of what is the right price for the Google keyword to get somebody to click on this. Can't be too high, then the advertiser's not going to spend on it. Can't be too low. What's the right spot to be able to get in there? So there's an economy in there that's super important. That economy is the win-win. But yeah, we'd love to do more on blockchain. Post Series B, maybe.
Lyle?
Yeah, is the business brand something that goes all the way to the tenant, or is it white labeled and the landlord doesn't let the tenant recognize the name stake?
And Rowland, do you mind repeating the question?
Oh yeah, sorry. So the question is, do we white label steak? No, we see ourselves as an ingredient brand. So what an ingredient brand is like the Intel Inside, right? Or the Good Housekeeping seal approval is like an ingredient brand. So we're happy if somebody wants to be able to say we have one group, Continental Properties. Is a Continental Cashback powered by Stake. They need to go to the Stake app to be able to get their money. They need to know where the checking account is held in. It's not held in a Continental checking account for a number of reasons, held in a Stake checking account. So they always know, it's always in front of the renter. We call them stakers in some way. But we are very pro being able to have brands in multifamily, single family who want to have it out there, and we can be an ingredient brand, the Intel Inside for that. And I can go into a lot of the reasons for that. There's some regulatory reasons for it. Just renters want to know where their money is, and if you say don't worry, your landlord's holding it, they don't. they don't buy that.
That's very, very, very surprising to hear that that's a concern.
I did some polling.
Max, yeah.
So I know it's only been a couple of years, but have you seen vacancy actually drop?
100%. Yeah. So that we judge that every day. We see. So we track demand. So how much demand goes up? Days on market. reduction in delinquency, increase in retention, increase in lease trade out. We even look at things of like in that demand and how much vacancy can go down based on different scenarios, like if it's a new lease up or the stabilized property, so value add remodel. So yeah, no, we're really, really close on that because there's different tools you can use to change that outcome. So I think the problem in the industry a little bit, I'm gonna go into the weeds for a second, but is that everybody thinks that dynamic pricing is price goes up, down. And like airlines and hotels have known that's not true for a long time. Like you need a second type of heat. Otherwise you're always just like in a down economy, you'll be like, well, I dropped the price. I just give away stuff. That's not dynamic pricing. You need the reward to be able to be like, no, I wanna be able to do something else right now it's taking 20 days to fill this apartment. I need it to be 10 days. Are you going to reduce the price or are you going to add a cashback reward? So that's what we do. Yeah.
We've been given the signal that
Oh, we've been given the signal. All right.
time is up, and we've got some hungry bellies in the room, I'm sure. So
Mine too.
yeah, if you have questions for Rowland, feel free to go hang out with him after lunch. And I know you're taking off somewhat soon.
I'll be here for a little bit. So yeah.
Get on him, yeah.
So we've got lunch in the same place we had breakfast. So we have an amazing local caterer that we're working with. So there's some shaved brisket, some slow smoked turkey clubs, some tomato pesto mozzarella sandwiches. So same place that you had breakfast. We're gonna take an hour and 15, so we'll come back at 1:15 for the start of the afternoon sessions.
Round of applause for Rowland.